let me ask you a question. Have you talk about the 5 different levels of encounters, right? If you don't mind explaining the 5 different encounters.
Sure. Oh yeah, we can do that. So a close encounter of the first kind is when an object is seen within a reasonable distance where you can actually see the structure of it. A close encounter of the second kind is when there's some physical evidence that is left, like it lands, it leaves evidence, like the Bentwaters case in England, or a radar, where it's on radar, like you saw, where there's some clear physical evidence that is resulting. Everyone knows what close encounter of the third kind is from the Steven Spielberg movie, is when there is a encounter with an actual extraterrestrial biological entity, an EBE. A close encounter of the fourth kind is when someone has an experience where they are taken on board one of these craft. And then a close encounter of the fifth kind is when humans, instead of these being those other 4 are passive events. A close encounter of the fifth kind is when humans initiate the communication and contact under a mutual conditions. So that's what a close encounter of the fifth kind is.
Which of the 5 have you personally experienced?
All 5.
You've personally experienced all 5?
Yes.
So you've personally had interaction with extraterrestrial aliens out there?
Yes.
Personally?
Yes.
And you're 100% about that?
Yes.
Has it been a face-to-face or it's been through the energy?
Face-to-face.
You face-to-face met an alien before?
Yes.
And how old were you when this happened?
First time that happened, I was 18. And it's a very interesting story. I wrote a book some years ago called Hidden Truth, Forbidden Knowledge, which is kind of a story about my life, how I got involved with this. And before I was in college, when I was a senior in high school, I got very sick and had a near-death experience. And I was raised in a scientific family where, if it didn't fit into a test tube or whatever, it didn't exist. So I was raised in an atheist, scientific, reductionist family. So I didn't have any belief systems about the pearly gates and the this and the that. Nevertheless, the truth is what it is. I got very sick. I died, had near-death experience, obviously came back to life. But in that process, had this amazing experience with what mystical literature would call cosmic consciousness, or that state of oneness with the conscious being of the cosmos. And I was out in space when this happened, because I had a great love for the earth and space. I didn't really care about the religious traditions because I wasn't raised that way. And that experience taught me that I really needed to understand what consciousness was, what the light of consciousness within us is. So I began on my 18th birthday, coincidentally, I learned meditation, and went off to college. So I'm up in North Carolina. I'm up in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I hike up this mountain and I'm meditating a little before sunset. But just before I close my eyes, I look out, and the same spacecraft that I saw when I was a child, 8 or 9 years of age, appeared again, or it looked the same. And it appeared, it materialized and dematerialized. It didn't just fly in and out like you see an airplane. And I went, oh, that's interesting. They're back. I didn't think more about it. I sat down and meditated. And at the end of the meditation, it lasted very long. It had gotten quite dark, and I'm up over 5,000 feet up in the Blue Ridge. And it was very clear in October of '73. And I look up in the beautiful Milky Ways above, and I then see that there's this, to be honest with you, and I know this sounds ridiculous, but you asked, I'll tell you. I thought it was a deer standing on its hind legs, upright like a human, and had these beautiful deer-like eyes. And then I realized it wasn't a deer. And I was very disoriented. I said, what the hell is this? It came over and touched me on my right shoulder. And actually so much I had a ski jacket on, I could see it indent. And it touched me, and there was this electromagnetic field that went around me. Bang. I vanished off the mountain, and I was on this craft for, I don't know, maybe I'm going to guess around 3 or 4 hours. And that's what happened to me when I was 18. I know it sounds like an unbelievable story, but that led me into really wanting to pursue how these civilizations travel, how they communicate. So in that experience, when I was on this object, I did this meditative process with these beings and created these close encounters of the fifth kind protocols. And I didn't do anything with it publicly for many, many years. That was in 73. I didn't do anything public with this until the early 90s. But what I did do is I began to experiment with it. And every time I'd experiment with it, where I was up in the mountains of North Carolina, one of these objects would appear. And I kind of got a little bit, I said, I don't think I should be doing this unless I have a better reason. So I stopped. And in the movie, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, you'll see a couple years later, I'm becoming a teacher of meditation. This is before I went to medical school. And I'm up in the Alps, in the French Alps, in the Maritime Alps. And one morning I decide to do this technique. So I go into quiet meditation. I remote view where these ET objects are, and I show them, reverse the process, and show them where I am up in the Alps near Isola, France. And that's it. I do it for maybe an hour during a meditation. I go out with some friends after lunch, and this massive tetrahedron appears in the crystal blue sky. And in the documentary that's out now, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, a friend of mine who was with me then, we were 19 years old, maybe had turned 20, very young. And this object appears and descends towards us. And she goes, "Steve, what did you do? Did you contact?" I said, "Yes." And of course, she's now freaking out, frankly. I go, "Marion, relax, they're fine. They're just, But so that happened. And then a couple years later, I tried it one more time. And that event led to that case that is in the movie with the police helicopter and the airline pilots in Charlotte, North Carolina, that saw these objects after I engaged in that protocol again. So I experimented with it periodically, but didn't formalize a project around it until 1990, about 30 years ago.